Welcome to social psychology. Today we're continuing our chapter on prejudice, stereotyping, and discrimination. We talked about several things already. The goals, like supporting and protecting one's group, managing self-image, and then we started things that have to do with seeking mental efficiency, right? That one reason why we are prejudiced, why we stereotype, we discriminate, just has to do with the way the mind works, the way the brain works, you know, that basically the way we process information, that basically the way we think is that basically we take in information and we like to mentally basically split it into categories, right? And that's what leads to the stereotyping, the prejudice, stereotyping, and discrimination. For us, when we form categories, we basically make it easier for us to remember things, right? And these categories are just stereotypes. Makes it easier for us to remember things, remember these categories, easier for us to predict what's going to happen, right? And easier for us to deal with, you know, the people we encounter who fit these categories. But of course, it facilitates, like I said, prejudice, stereotyping, and discrimination when we divide people into these categories. Now, more about this. So when it comes to seeking mental efficiency, there is something known as a need for simple structure. It's a personality characteristics. There are some people who like things simple, okay? It's basically that they think in simplistic terms. They want their life simple, right? They live simple lives that are simple and just well organized. They dislike interruptions and unexpected events. They're just used to things a certain way, and they want to continue to believe the same things and live the same lives. They don't really like things to change very much, and they don't like things that are unexpected. They tend to categorize the world into simple ways. These people who have this need for simple structure, they like things simple. They like to think about things simply in a simple way, and they categorize the world in simple ways. So it's an us versus them kind of thing. You're either one of the good guys or you're one of the bad guys. You're either a good Christian or you're evil and you're going to hell. That kind of stuff, right? You're either believe, you know, in our way of life, right? Or you're a communist. You're either a good American or you're a terrorist or something like that. They believe things like that. Us versus them kind of mentality, black and white sort of thing, right? They are more likely to use stereotypes to understand others. They're more likely to think, for instance, that Latinos are all illegal and they're all uneducated and all have menial jobs. They're more likely to just believe that Black people, for instance, are all just good at sports, or that they're all loud, and the negative stereotypes as well, right? They're more likely to believe these kind of things. That Muslims are terrorists, right? It's a really bad stereotype. Not true, okay? Most people are good people, no matter what religion you're from. Now, there are people who are terrorists. We have them in this country too, okay? It's not just people out there, right? They're also in this country. Americans, yes, white people and people of every race and religion can be terrorists. But the stereotype is, of course, that it's people from the Middle East and Muslim, things like that. And it's not true, okay? But these people are more likely to see the world in that sort of way. Us versus them, good versus evil, black versus white. Good, honest, American, Christian versus everybody else, you all suck, right? They're more likely to stereotype. They have this, like I said, you're either one of the good guys or you're one of the bad guys kind of thing. You know, that sort of stuff. It's a very bad way of thinking of the world. The world is much more complex than that. There's good and bad people of every ethnicity, every religion, young, old, right? That's the reality. It's not that people who are different from you are evil. That is not true. They believe different things, they lead different lives, may behave differently. That doesn't mean that they're bad, that they're evil. Your way of life, what you believe, isn't any better than what they believe. That's the reality. In reality, things are complicated. But these people just want to believe things as just black and white. And they're more likely to stereotype and discriminate, things like that. They don't like it when they meet people who don't fit their stereotypes. They don't like it when they meet, for instance, a well-educated Latino who has a good job, right? Like They don't like it. They're frustrated by that, annoyed by that. Like, what? You have a good job? What? I mean, it's like I thought you're just a gardener. No, we're not all like that. Okay, that's the thing. These people are shocked and annoyed when they see things like that. What? You're doing better than me, but I'm an American or whatever it is. Yeah, so am I. Okay, but sometimes they only view Americans as white. That kind of thing. It's simple, right? That kind of simple thinking. Here's the thing. There was an experiment that was done when it came to looking at the need for simple structure and how they handle situations. So students read a story of an identical story. In one case, in one version of the story, it was a male. In another version of the story, it was a female. Okay, so it was either Richard or Michelle. Okay, Richard/Michelle was a junior at ASU and was taking Math 110, which is pre-calculus and geometry, right, against the advice of his or her roommate. His or her roommate told her, or him, hey, that's a tough class. Don't take it. You're not going to do well, right? It's really hard, no, consider like taking something else, right? After spring break, actually it says she, right? She or he started to get behind in the class, right? And it turned out to be an especially bad week. Okay, so yes, things got tough. Person wasn't doing so well. Okay. Students were tested in their need for simple structure ahead of time. It's a personality thing. And it turns out that students that were high in the need for simple structure, those that are basically have more of that personality characteristics, made judgments more in line with sex stereotypes. When they were asked why the situation was the way it was, they were more likely to say that, well, women are not that good at math, right? Women shouldn't be trying to, take those kind of classes. They were more sexist, okay? More in line, their thinking was more in line with stereotypes. Michelle was judged as more emotional and irrational than Richard in the exact same situation, same story. Those that have more of this need for simple structure, who think in more simplistic terms, are just more likely to use stereotypes. And there's plenty of people like that, by the way, who believe in that black and white sort of thinking. Remember, we're a very divided country. And there's a lot of people who believe that if you're not on my side, whether it's politically, whether it's religion, race, whatever it is, you're one of the bad guys. And they want to get rid of you, okay? Or they don't like you. And they want to pass laws, right, that are not in your favor, but, that are make it harder for you. It's a very bad thing to think of the world in a very simple way. In reality, people are complex, things are complex. That's the way things are. The more simplistic your way of thinking, the more you stereotype, right? The more prejudiced you can be, and the more you're probably going to discriminate. It basically means that you don't think very intelligently, is really what it means. To put it bluntly, by the way, when you think in these simplistic terms, you can't handle the complexity of life. You don't want to think about the complexity, but that's the reality. The enemy is not evil or bad or awful. They're usually just other people who have a lot of things in common with you, but you think of them like the enemy. That is the reality. Okay. Let's keep going. Moods, emotion, arousal. Let's think about those things. How does this impact prejudice, stereotyping, and discrimination? Okay. Well, compared with a neutral mood, stereotyping is enhanced by a positive mood. Believe it or not, when you're in a positive mood, you're more likely to stereotype because you're less motivated to think carefully. When you're in a good mood, it's like, yeah, everything's cool or whatever it is. And like, yeah, you know how those people are. They're all the same. You're in a good mood. You don't really think that hard when you're in a good mood. That's just the way it is. People are not that careful in their thinking when they're in a good mood. And that leads to more stereotyping. But also when you're angry or when you're anxious, that also reduces available cognitive resources. When you're angry or when you're anxious, it is harder for you to think. You're stressed out, you're anxious. That takes up attention. It takes up memory, cognitive resources. And then what happens is that you're more likely to make very simplistic judgments, more likely to make very stereotypical judgments. You're more likely to stereotype in general. Not stereotyping requires more careful thinking. It requires thinking in more complex ways, more analytically, more logically. When you start to realize that things are not so simple. that those people that, no, they're not all that way. That those people are not necessarily bad because they're different, or wrong because they think differently, okay? Simple physiological arousal, even from exercise, even just becoming more physiologically aroused, just from pedaling a bike or running on a treadmill, that also will also increase stereotyping. It's, it's increasing physiological arousal. And this is how it works. Let me explain, okay? Well, actually, we're gonna, physiological arousal. So the example is not about physiological arousal, but it's about anger, which actually increases physiological arousal. So let me make that point before I move on, okay? So anger does increase physiological arousal. And here's how it works. Okay, so something like intense anger, for instance, actually reduces motivation to form unbiased impressions. When you're angry, you usually don't want to be nice to people. You don't want to be kind. You're more likely to say, you know what, screw you guys, right? You're all the same. The hell with you guys, right? That kind of stuff. You're angry. It reduces motivation for you to be unbiased. You're going to be very biased. You're more likely to stereotype people in negative ways. Okay. Intense anger also reduces the capacity for you to think more carefully. Anger's arousal makes it more difficult to engage in thoughtful processes needed to see the other person in non-stereotypical ways. Anger increases arousal, right? Takes up attention, takes up your thoughts, right? You're thinking negative things, all that stuff. So it reduces your cognitive resources, your memory, your thinking ability, all that stuff, and that leads to more stereotyping. It reduces the capacity. It's like your mind is being taken up by the anger and the angry thoughts and associations. Intense anger also affects the construal or the interpretation of the situation. When you're angry, right, the negative tinge of anger increases the likelihood of seeing others in unfavorable ways and interpreting others' behavior unfavorably. As even if it's just neutral, even if their behavior isn't good or bad, you're more likely to see it in a bad way when you're in a bad mood, when you're angry. And that again leads to more stereotyping. That's how it works. That's an example of how anger and even physiological arousal increases stereotyping. And this all has to do with the third goal, right? That part of the reason we are prejudiced, we stereotype and discriminate is to maintain mental efficiency. We don't want to think that hard, so we're more likely to stereotype. And when other things make it hard for us to actually interpret things more carefully, to be more analytical, more logical, more careful thinking, when other things reduce that, that increases stereotyping, as we saw with the example with anger. Let's keep going. Let's get to the fourth goal of gaining, prejudice, stereotyping, and discrimination. Another reason people do that is to gain social approval. And this sounds particularly bad, right? How people can be that way just so they can get the approval of other people. So we're going to talk about in-group identification. We're going to talk about conformity and even religion. Okay, so let's get into this. Gaining social approval. So in-group identification. In-group identification is the extent to which you identify with your group, whether it's your race or ethnicity, your religion, your political party, okay, or your social class, whether you're upper class, middle class, or lower class, or even with your school, let's say, UCLA, USC, whatever it is, right? The more you identify with the group, the more prejudiced and discriminatory you tend to be. The more you're likely to be, not just be prejudiced, but also stereotype and discriminate. In-group identification is actually not a good thing for prejudice, stereotyping, and discrimination. The more you identify with your group, the more you like your group, the more you're in favor of your group, the worse for other groups. Just to give you an example, KKK members, right, have very high in-group identification. Their group, right? What's their group, right? They believe that, the US should only be for white people, Only white people. You have to be white. If you're anything else, you don't belong. You shouldn't be here. You shouldn't be asking for more rights. You shouldn't even be here, right? And that, they need to get rid of you. Some of them are likely to be violent, but not just the KKK. There's all kinds of groups out there that share similar beliefs, whether we're talking about white supremacists or we're talking about other groups you might have heard about recently, if I'm remembering correctly, like the 3%ers, or there's all these groups, right? They were kind of all there at that Trump rally, by the way, okay? Stormed the Capitol, a lot of them were there, okay? All these people have high in-group identification. This is a white country for white people only. These people shouldn't be here. America sucks because of them. That's the problem right there, okay? That's part of the problem, okay? In-group identification. The more you believe in your group, the more you like your group and want to protect your group and everything for your group, the more it comes at the expense of others. Being white shouldn't matter that much, okay? Or even being Black or Latino or anything, it shouldn't matter. And it's not just one group, any group, right? Your religion, right? The more you associate with a certain religion, the more you believe in that, the more you care about it, the more unfavorably you see other religions. That's in-group identification. Even if we just talk about sex, the more you identify with being male, the worse women look, right? Because your group is the best group. They're the smarter, more capable, more deserving, more everything. That's the problem. And people join these groups in order to get approval, in order to feel connected, to feel they're a part of something. And they feel better when they join these groups. It boosts their self-esteem. It gives them purpose. It gives them pride. They're trying to make themselves feel better. They're trying to get social approval. Right? That's the reality. And let me mention something else before I get to conformity. Something else about that, okay? This is going to sound bad, okay? But it absolutely makes sense. Those that are also more pro-America are also going to be more prejudiced, more stereotyped, they're going to discriminate more. Or more pro any country, whether if you're British or more pro, if you're in India, more pro India, whatever. The more you identify with the group, whether it's your country, your group, your way of life, right? The worse it is for others. The most patriotic people are often the most racist, the most prejudiced, the ones stereotyped the most. Because they really love that group. And anyone who doesn't fit the description of who they think should be in that group is excluded and disliked. And it's not just about the US, it could be about, like I said, the Middle East. Trust me, a lot of them hate us. And the more they love their country and their group, the more they hate us. It's the same thing with people here. Those who are the most patriotic, the ones who love this country the most, are often the ones who can't stand outsiders the most. Not all of them. Some of them can be, very patriotic and still kind of others, but for the most part, there is a correlation there. The more you identify with the group, no matter what the group is, the more you dislike other groups, the more you're prejudiced, you stereotype, you discriminate. How many times have you seen at those rallies, right? Those KKK rallies, or those other, whatever, outright, the extreme right-wing rallies and all this stuff. How many times have you seen the American flag and the shirts with the American? These people are very patriotic. They love the country, but they hate outsiders, people who they consider to be outsiders. And to them, it's only for white people, the country. Mexicans, all go back to Mexico, right? And they think all Latinos are Mexican, right? For some reason, right? Black people all go back to Africa. Asian people, you shouldn't be there. Go back to China, go back to Japan, right? This country's for white people. That is your in-group identification. That's your KKK. That's your white supremacy. That's all that stuff right there. The extreme right wing. These armed militias who want to storm the Capitol and take over the government because they don't agree with what the government is doing because the government is passing laws they don't like, right? That's all in-group identification. That is the blunt reality of that. Okay, and I'm being straight and honest with you guys about this stuff. It is a very bad thing, okay, to identify too highly with any group. Doesn't mean you can't love your country, right? But don't be that extreme, right? where you basically just see it as it's just for you and people like you, right? Extreme in-group identification. Conformity seeking. Conformity is also a problem. When people conform, we talked about this before, they do what other people are doing, even when there's no rule or law that's been written about that. So when people conform, they just do what other people are doing. They follow the group. And research shows that we may conform to negative views of other groups in order to win approval from members of our group. And the best example of that I can give you is politics. Republicans, Democrats, right? They view the other group as bad, as being out of touch with America, as just being dumb, not worthy of leadership or things like that. They say some of the same things about each other. Republicans attack Democrats of being dumb and un-American, and Democrats attack Republicans of being the same thing, of some of the same thing, right? And they conform, right? If you're a Republican, you have to believe Democrats are bad, right? Whatever Democrats are for, you have to be against, and you have to vote against. If you're a Democrat, you have to be against what Republicans are for and argue against it. And that is conformity. They belong to these groups, and they all have to fall in line, whatever the agenda is, whatever it is. And it also depends on who's leading the groups, right? And what agenda they want carried forward, right? That's conformity. And trust me, there is a lot of common ground. There is places in which they could agree, but they will not agree with each other because they have to oppose each other. You have to be against the other side. This conformity, right? Where you can't reach across the aisle. People try, but mostly those people are in the minority because people are just going to side with that group and believe whatever the group says. That is conformity. A prejudiced social environment may also provide permission for people to express bigoted opinions they already hold. When you're in an environment that's very prejudiced, or that is advocating for things that are racist, sexist, right? You may kind of just agree with them to get along, right? Or you may also be in those groups, right? And feel that it's safe for now you to express your basically your hate, your sexist ideology and things like that. It just depends on who the audience is. Yes, these different groups, they say different things when there's a different audience. When it's only just them, that's where you see some of the reality of what they believe in. When it's more of a general audience, they will try to tone it down, that it's not as extreme as you may think it is, right? Things like that. I've seen this with my own eyes, and with groups and things like that. When you're in a group that's kind of like just saying some things that are very sexist. In my own family, a lot of sexism. I grew up in that kind of environment. And when you're in that kind of environment, yes, you're gonna agree with some things, you're gonna say some things, and it's not until you get older you realize, you know what, that was actually kind of messed up. That was kind of wrong and stuff like that. I didn't realize that I was advocating for that kind of stuff because it's just part of the culture. Latinos are very macho, very macho culture, right? But that's just one example. It's also in politics or race or whatever it is, right? Is it okay to make racist jokes? Well, if you're around certain people, apparently it is. Those people will welcome that or will want to hear that or whatever it is. If you're in that kind of environment, sometimes people show their true colors when they're around people who are just like themselves. And let me give you another example. There's this one time that we had, when I was a graduate student, we had this very well-known researcher come over to USC to give this talk about his research. And, faculty attended, graduate students were there, and some students, and we were there and we heard the talk. I mean, the guy was, a really well-known researcher, really, talking about his theory and stuff like that, very smart, very capable, answered questions and everything. And then after that was over, we met in a smaller room where we had some drinks and some snacks and things like that. And we were just hanging out, just socializing, basically, very informal. And then people would come and go. Sometimes people would stay for a little bit and then they'd leave. And then and then people would show up. There came a time when that person was in the room with nothing but white male graduate students. And that is when they realized that, my God, this person is awful. This person's really sexist and racist. They didn't know that. because then those people, some of those people worked in our lab, and they reported back to us, the rest of us, who are, privileged enough to be white and hear those things, right? They report to us, you should have seen what this guy was saying when it was just us in the room, right? He started talking all this racist stuff about Black people. So saying all this awful stuff. And there was a helper who came in, a student worker who's actually was in charge of basically bringing the snacks and drinks and stuff like that. And, when she wasn't there anymore, and it was just this person and the white males in the room, he started saying that basically that this person should dance on the table for them and strip. This is what this guy started saying, a very well-known psychologist. I don't even remember his name, by the way. And our fellow graduate students reported back to us, you should have seen this guy. My God, we had no idea. Sometimes you often think of people who are very smart, very accomplished, someone who's a very good researcher, scientist like that they wouldn't hold such opinions, but sometimes they do. And sometimes you only see that when they're in a certain environment, right? And we only know about it. Some of us only know about it because we weren't there, right? That's what happens. That's what you often see, in those groups when they're just among their own kind. Then you see the truth come out, right? And what they really believe and how awful and how bad some of their ideas are. That they don't just like certain people, that they actually want to even get rid of them, okay? But yeah, let's talk about religion. Religion, can be both good and bad. Let me just say that right from the beginning. But religion has been the cause of so many problems, okay, in general. But there's different forms of religiosity, okay? There's just different ways in which you can approach religion. There is, for instance, what we call extrinsic religiosity. Extrinsic means it's outward, on the outside, right? There are people who are religious only on the outside, okay? In other words, actually, let me put it this way. They use religion as a way to get external things. These are people who have extrinsic religiosity. They see religion as a way of gaining friendship, a way of gaining status, comfort, or other valuable things. Yes, you do get rewards from joining a group, whether it's a religious group or a political group, there are rewards. And when it comes to religion, yes, there are some big rewards. Let me just mention some of them, okay? First of all, in this country, if you want to get elected to office, it is very advisable that you be a Christian, a white Christian, by the way. It's much harder if you are Muslim or any other religion that's not Christian to get elected. Actually, it's best of all, if you want to have the best chance, not just Christian, but evangelical, okay, just to make it clear. There are some who use religion only as a way to get ahead, to basically get into office. There are some who are not really religious at all. They don't believe in the teachings. They're just using religion to get ahead, right? Sometimes to get business, right? Because yes, people of the same religion will give each other's business, right? Whether if you're a real estate agent or a car insurance agent or something like that, comfort each other or finding someone to date, someone to marry. There are people who only use religion for external things, is what I'm saying. Okay, that's what I'm saying. Okay, extrinsic and people who are extrinsically religious express more prejudice than non-religious people. These people are usually very prejudiced. Okay, the ones who don't even believe in the teachings, they're just using religion to get ahead and to gain favor and rewards. Okay, that's the worst kind of religiosity, just so you know. Okay, there are people who are just like that. And by the way, we have many people like that who are just in office or just using religion and say they're Christian or they're this or that, just so they look like good people so they can get elected. Okay, there's plenty of people like that. I'll give you one example. That last president we had, he wasn't a Christian. He was just pretending. There's no way that man is a Christian. You know who I'm talking about, Donald Trump. There is absolutely no way. But he got the Christian vote. I'm not sure he ever said he was Christian, but of course he got the conservative judges on there on the Supreme Court, but he was just using religion to get elected. I guarantee you that man does not believe in God. He believes in nothing but himself. I guarantee you that man is not a Christian. There's absolutely no way. And after class is over, I would challenge you to try to convince me that that man is a Christian, because you're talking to a Christian right now. Actually, not talking to Christian, but you're hearing from a Christian right now. And I can tell you that is no Christian. But he's fooled a lot of people. And they got his support. And they're still going to give him support later on. This man is a wolf in sheep's clothing. He is evil pretending to be good. He is not what he claims to be. There's no way. There's too many other things that suggest he's not. And that's one example of extrinsic religiosity, people who just use religion for the rewards. Now, there is intrinsic religiosity, people who are religious, and it's a part of their life. It's just who they are. It's intrinsic. They internalize the beliefs. They really believe in the teachings. They are true believers. They internalize the teachings, right? The beliefs, right? They believe in that. They see religion as a way of life. It's the only thing that they know. They were brought up in this sort of life. They are very religious people, and they know no other thing. They've been brought up in the religion, and everything about their lives has to do with the religion. They have intrinsic religiosity. These people present themselves as unprejudiced, but may discriminate if others aren't looking. You know, they may say things, oh, yes, God loves everybody, right? Yes, you should, just, hate the sin, love the sinner, that kind of stuff. They really believe in the teachings, but privately, a lot of them don't like people who are different than they are. Because when you really believe very strongly in the religion, this is part of in-group identification, that means that people who don't share your religion, who are not like you, it means that they're bad people, that they don't belong, right? When that sort of religiosity is also associated with discriminating and being prejudiced and not liking people who are different. Because remember, these are true believers, right? They believe things like we are the true Christians, right? The people who are worshiping the true God, and the other people are not. The other people are outsiders. They're phonies. And even within the religion, there are people who are not true believers, who are going to be, and then when the whole thing about the consummation of the age and or the whole thing, what do they call that? The rapture happens, that some of those people are basically going to be left behind and they're going to have to suffer. And the other people are just going to be, ascendant to heaven, right? So they really believe strongly in the teachings, and they believe that outsiders are just going to go to hell, that they don't belong, and they don't like them very much. Although they will pretend that they're okay with everybody, they are not. And then there is the type of religiosity that doesn't really make people more prejudiced. And this is quest religiosity, that see religion as a journey, right? As something to, as something to achieve spiritual growth and understanding, right? To understand spiritual and moral issues. These are people who don't believe they have all the answers. These are people who believe in growth and development. They are more likely to be accepting of others. They are truly non-prejudiced. They don't discriminate. They accept others, no matter who they are, right? They see it more as a kind of a journey, right? They really do believe that they don't have all the answers, that they don't know everything. These people, by the way, they claim they have all the answers. God hates homosexuals, they say. God hates those people. God's going to punish all those people. Some of them believe that God's going to kill all those people. That's what they believe. These people see it more like, you know what? We don't have all the answers. We don't know. We should love and accept everybody and follow, the good example that, that was set, right? And that, the religious teachings and stuff like that. I can only speak from the Christian point of view. I don't know much about Muslim religion, things like that. But there are a lot of things in there in the Bible. And they believe that it's open to interpretation. That if there's something that seems racist or sexist and things like that, that, maybe that's not really what it means. Maybe it means this, right? They're more open, basically, to, it's more like a journey, what I'm saying. They're more open to growth and development. They don't claim they have all the answers. The more you claim you have all the answers, that you know how it is, the more it is basically to the contrary of other people. And by the way, I just want to point out in the Bible and stuff like that, the Old Testament, a lot more harsh than the New Testament. Are you more of an Old Testament kind of person? More mean, more harsh, eye for an eye kind of thing? or the New Testament kind of thing. That's more about, Jesus and things like that. I can only speak to the Christian religion. I don't know much about Muslim, but about that, that's a very different story, by the way. That is a lot more tolerance, a lot more acceptance, a lot more love there. The Old Testament is very kind of harsh, and that just depends on how you interpret things, right? But these people believe they don't have all the answers, that they don't know everything, and they're not the ultimate authority in deciding who's good, who's bad, and who God's gonna accept into heaven or his kingdom or things like that. These people are more open-minded, more tolerant. These people think they know everything, and they're not as tolerant. And these people are just using religion and aren't really believers at all. These people are your wolves in sheep's clothing, so to speak. These are the people who are actually just bad, okay, pretending to be good, if you want to put it that way, okay. That's the research on that's religiosity, the different types. And in the past, just so you know, religion has been the cause of so many wars, so many evils, so many killings, so many awful things. We should be more tolerant, more accepting, right? No matter what your religion is. And instead of just believing that you're just the, whatever, God's chosen people and that everyone else is going to hell and you should just get rid of everyone else, right? How do we reduce prejudice, stereotyping, and discrimination? We've talked about the problems. Now, how do we make it better? Okay, how can we improve on the situation? So we're going to talk about the contact hypothesis, which is actually very old and was proposed a long time ago. We're going to talk about other approaches, the common in-group identity model, mutual differentiation model, multiculturalism, Jigsaw Classroom, other approaches to making things better. Some of these are older than others. Let's start with the contact hypothesis. What does the contact hypothesis says? What does it say? The contact hypothesis says that exposing people to different groups should reduce prejudice. You want to reduce prejudice, right, among people of different ethnicity, different race, whatever you want to call it. Have those people work together, go to school together, live together, right? They need to be exposed to each other, and they'll learn to like each other. The assumption is that negative stereotypes and prejudice are due to ignorance, that we're really mistaken about the other people, that they're not really bad, and we just need to understand them, be around them in order to know this. Okay? If you want to know that those other people who have that other religion are not that bad, talk to them, right? Invite them into your home, right? Be exposed to these people, and you'll see they're not evil, they're not bad, they're different. Okay? Here's the thing though, merely putting people in different groups does little to reduce hostility. Yes, people should have contact, but just putting them together is not enough. And the government did try to do that. We have tried to do that in this country. Remember desegregation, right? Where they opened up the schools to different people. Remember, there used to be a time when white people went to white schools, black people went to black schools. Basically, there were schools for whites and there were schools for everybody else, okay? That the Supreme Court found basically unlawful and discriminatory, so they did away with that. That meant that black children could go to white schools, and people were very opposed to it. The history is just very, it's kind of heartbreaking when you see some of the stuff the lengths that people went to keep this from happening, to not let people into those schools. Governors, parents, and all kinds of people didn't want people in the same class with black people, with black children. They didn't want contact. They don't, and they still don't. A lot of them still don't, by the way. Those people, a lot of people are still like that. Okay, we still have a lot of segregation. It was kind of, desegregation was kind of something that happened. They tried to make that happen, but people resisted it. They didn't want it. Parents complained, governors complained, people voted against it. There were riots, there was bombings, there was killings, there was all kinds of awful things as a result of that. It's not enough to try to put people together. Okay, there's other things missing. But it's just heartbreaking to see that so many people oppose to that, the racist, awful history, right, of that. And still, for the most part, schools are segregated. You have white schools, you know, black kids can go there, but you have schools where the majority are white and schools where the majority are black, and there's some that are more diverse, but for the most part, people segregate themselves. And there's still a lot of segregation, a lot of discrimination, despite these efforts. For the most part, white people don't want to live next to black people. It's still the case today. Rich people don't want to live next to poor people. So contact may not be enough. There might be other things that are needed, and we'll talk about those things. Okay, contact helps. In order for contact to work, according to research, you need all these other things. It's not just putting people together, but you need the outgroup members to have traits, abilities that challenge negative stereotypes. You need the people who have contact to be non-stereotypical. If the people are very stereotypical, that doesn't really help. That just confirms what other people already believe. Okay. Like the stereotype, for instance, that white people are wealthy and that, you know, and that people of color are poor, right? Well, if you have poor people going to a rich white school, it's not going to help very much because those people are stereotypical, okay? And they're not going to get along very well. Contact is also supported by authorities and norms. Yes, the mayors, the governors, the president, the elected officers, right? Our elected officials, the police, the school officials, all have to be on board that this is okay and this is something that's good. In the past, of course, that was not the case. Governors, mayors, presidents, a bunch of people were against it, people in power, and they made things worse. They called in the authorities, they called in the police to try to stop basically the desegregation, and it's a very awful history. And just so you know what's been happening recently, that last president we had did not support things like this, did not support different groups coming together and living together and working together and being united. That last president tried to divide us as much as he could. Politics, using politics, race, gender, absolutely every way he could to divide us, he tried. He was not for any of this stuff. And you see what the result of that was. You see how much worse things got as a result of our president, the person at the very top, not believing in this very thing, not believing that we should be united. And that is what happens when the authorities do not believe in it. You have a lot more hate crimes now. They've gone up. He started calling the coronavirus the Asian virus or the China virus. What has happened as a result of that? Asian people are getting attacked. That is what happens when the authorities, the people in leadership position, do not agree in unifying the country, do not agree in contact, do not agree that we should all be one, right, and united. That's what happens when somebody tries to divide us for his own political agenda, for his own political ends to stay in power, right? That is what happens. It's a very dangerous thing. When authorities and stuff do support it, the president, the governors, all that stuff, it's better. Okay, the people in the leadership positions need to be for this. Otherwise, it doesn't work. The groups also have to be of equal status in the contact setting. It doesn't help if one group is poor and the other one is rich. They're not going to like each other. Contact has to be at the individual level, not at the group level, where it's one white basketball team against a black basketball team. That's going to make things worse. That's competition. It has to be at the individual level. Within the school, within the basketball teams, within the clubs and the classes, you have to have people in there who are diverse, so they can form friendships and get along with each other and get to know each other at the individual level, not at the group level, not at the political level, at the individual level. Okay? Contact has to be rewarding, yes, not competition, not fighting with each other, not competing over power and the presidency and things like that. That makes things worse when it's seen as an us versus them kind of thing, a black versus white thing, or a white against everybody else kind of thing. Right? It has to be rewarding, right? When you're part of a team together, you know, whether it's a basketball team or the military or you're part of a school, the football team, all that, right? When you can make it rewarding, when you work together toward a common goal, that's the last thing, right? That's how things get better. You have to be united, right? Work toward a common goal. It has to be at the individual level. Authorities have to be for it, not against it. And believe me, a lot of authorities are still against it. Okay? And there's a lot of people still out there who want to maintain the status quo, which is very unacceptable, right? Who still want to maintain those laws and past laws that discriminate, things that are sexist and racist. There are people fighting for that. It's very disconcerting, but it is out there. It is happening. You know, contact requires all of this, according to research. And some people say because it requires all this, that it doesn't work. Why even try it if there's all these conditions? These conditions could all be met very easily when you're a part of a team. Okay, whether it's basketball team, the military, whatever it is, or just a part of a school. All these friendships can happen at the individual level. It can happen easily, but people have to be on board. The leadership has to be on board. All right, let's talk about models of models to help reduce prejudice, stereotyping, and discrimination. Approaches, you can think of them like theories. The common in-group identity model says that you need two things to reduce prejudice, stereotyping, and discrimination. You need decategorization and you need a superordinate group. Decategorization means that basically you get rid of the groups. You can reduce, it says that to reduce prejudice, stereotyping, and discrimination, you have to minimize the categories and focus on individuals. In other words, group membership shouldn't matter. Your religion, forget about it, okay? Stop calling yourself by that religion. Don't talk about religion. Your race, ethnicity, don't talk about that stuff. Not important, doesn't matter. Even your, the stuff about you being, upper class, middle class, forget about that. Republican, no, none of that stuff. Get rid of the groups, right? That doesn't matter. We have to have things at the individual level. That's what it says. And you need a superordinate group. So we need to get rid of the individual groups. We need to get rid of these other groups. And then we need to have one big group, the superordinate group. Individuals see themselves as part of a larger group that emphasizes what we have in common, like American, right? That we're all Americans. Whether you're black, white, Asian, Latino, rich, poor, right, Democrat, Republican, Christian, Muslim, all Americans. This is a very, a country that includes many different types of people, and we're all belong to this country. We're all a part of this country. Believing in that bigger group and seeing yourself more in terms of that identity, more that way. Okay. The thing is about the superordinate group, what American means has varied, okay, the definition of that. Believe it or not, it wasn't that long ago, like the 80s or even before, American just meant white. Only white people kind of were allowed to use the word American, right? White people call themselves American. Everybody else, oh, no, you're not American. No, you're Latino, you're Asian, you're black, right? Now, American, right, is a more superordinate category. Now we see it as more inclusive, right? Now it involves everybody. But it wasn't that long ago when American just meant white. It wasn't that long ago. So the group has to be big, all-encompassing, okay, include everybody. That's what this approach says, that you need that. Now, this was an old approach, and it doesn't always hold up to scrutiny. In the 70s, they tried to make things better by following that approach. The 1970s, when desegregation and all that stuff, they tried this approach. They tried what they called the colorblind approach. In other words, race doesn't matter. This is mostly done with race, not religion or anything like that, but race doesn't matter. In other words, don't call yourself black or white or anything like that, right? Don't think about that stuff. Don't even think about it. Your ethnicity, your race, right? They're really just talking about race back then. Nowadays, we know race is not even a real scientific term. It's just made up, okay? But anyway, that's the approach that they tried, right? Don't talk about race. Don't talk about being black or white or anything like that. Administrators, teachers, students discouraged any talk of race, any talk of ethnicity. Don't think about it. Don't talk about it. It's not allowed. It's a bad thing. No, don't talk about that, right? And they enforced this. at the schools. What happened is it resulted in self-segregation and conflict in the lunchroom. They controlled it inside the classrooms, right? But in the lunchroom, people segregated themselves. The white people were over here, the black people were over there, and they didn't like each other and they didn't get along. What happened? What went wrong here? Telling people not to care about who they are, right? Not to care about being black or white or their ethnicity is actually hard for people. And the more they're told not to think about something, well, the more people think about it. If I tell you guys not to think about sex, what are you going to think about? You're going to think about sex. I brought it up, now you're thinking about it, right? Yeah, and don't think about it. Stop it, right? The more I tell you that, the more you think about it, right? It's the same thing with race and ethnicity. The more you try to ignore it, the more you try not to think about it, the more you think about it. That's not all that's wrong with that, okay? That's not the only thing. Big problem with that they didn't see back then, that I see now, is that this ignores all the problems. So they want everyone basically not to talk about that. But they ignore the fact that black people are a lot worse off than white people. They're gonna ignore the problems that exist in our society, okay? With the policing, the problems with the, the stereotyping and all that. It's as if that doesn't exist, as if it doesn't matter. Hey man, we're all the same. And like, you know what? We're not. You can't just ignore the problems and expect that they're gonna go away. That doesn't work. And that, by the way, I want to point out, is the same problem with the all lives matter kind of talk, right? You know, when people say, hey, Black Lives Matter, and then people who don't want to go along with that approach, they say, oh, no, all lives matter. What are they really saying? It's kind of this approach. Forget about your whole race kind of thing. Hey, we all matter. That's what they're saying, right? No, that doesn't work. And it doesn't work for the same reason. It doesn't work because those people want to ignore the problem, that there isn't inequity, that there isn't racism, right? They just want to ignore it. That's really the problem. You can't just ignore that these differences exist and that we have inequities and things like that. We can't just say, okay, we're all starting from scratch now, right? We're all equal. Like, no, there's a lot of problems that we need to fix before we even get to that. And that's the problem with that. Black Lives Matter says, hey, we have a problem here with the way Black people are being treated. And these people are saying, no, we all matter. In other words, they're saying, no, we're all important. Never mind you, right? And that doesn't work. You can't just ignore the problem. There is a problem there. And you need to address it. And we can't just admit, and we can't just like pretend that it's not there. We can't pretend that people are treated differently based on race, that there is discrimination. There's all this stuff that we need to address. We can't just pretend that it doesn't exist. That's the problem. And by the way, I'm even less pessimistic about the all lives matter thing. Some people say all lives matter, and what they're really trying to say, okay, yeah, we all matter. But in reality, people who say all lives matter, they don't agree with anything about the Black Lives Matter movement. They don't want changes in policing or in this or that or anything. What they're basically saying when they say all lives matter is F you. We're all important and screw you, right? That's what they're saying. We don't agree with you, right? That's what they're saying. It's just a big F you is what it is, right? They're basically saying like, no, we're gonna pretend nothing's wrong. Let's not think about race. Let's not think about anything like that. And we can't do that. There's already too much of that happening. Too many people being silent and ignoring the atrocities, the inequity, the awful things that are happening. Too many people turning a blind eye and pretending it doesn't exist. That doesn't help. That's your colorblind approach. No, Black lives do matter. There is a problem there and we need to deal with it. Yes, we do need to deal with these different groups. They exist and we need to find a way to make people get along. So there's other approaches. There's the mutual differentiation model. The mutual differentiation model says a little bit more. It says that we need a superordinate group. We do need that big group. We're all Americans, right? Or let's make it even bigger. How about we're all human beings and we all matter, right? more than that. Let's be inclusive, right? Let's include the whole world, the whole people, all of humanity. Make it even better, right? Superordinate group, right? And it says, you can still care about your subgroups. You get to keep your subgroup identity. So you can still think of yourselves as Latino, Black, Asian, white, Muslim, Christian, all that stuff still matters. It's part of your culture, part of who you are, right? Yes, you can think of yourselves as that as well. But remember, we're all human beings, or we're all Americans, right? Remember that, okay? And it also emphasizes cooperative interdependence. In other words, it emphasizes the unique contributions of each individual, of each group, I should say, right? That we make the country better because of our diversity, right? That we all contribute to the common good. And all you have to do, to think about that. Actually, I'm not going to get into that too much because I'm going to talk about multiculturalism in a moment. That kind of speaks to that we make the country better and richer and much more interesting, much better because we are so diverse, that it's a strength, not a weakness. But it emphasizes all those things. And that is better, but there are problems. And see, here's the thing. Here are the problems with that approach. The salience of the superordinate group and subgroups may vary in given situations. So how important the overall group is, the larger group, how much people care about it, varies depending on what's happening. When there's a time of crisis, when we face a common enemy, yes, we come together. We're all Americans, right? And we want to defeat the enemy, right? That's what happened during 9/11. Just like in the movie Independence Day, if we were to be attacked by aliens and the only way we could win is to unite as the whole world, we would probably do that. How important the overall group varies. When times are good, what happens is we go back to caring about our other groups, right? Actually, it's more the opposite. Okay, here's the thing. So because I'm getting confused here. During a time of crisis, yes, that unites us. Okay, but when it's not, and I'm talking about being attacked by an enemy, an outside force, right? But maintaining the subgroup identities may increase conflict during times of crisis. Actually, that's exactly what I was saying. But with an outside enemy, an outside threat would unite us. But what I'm saying is, by times of crisis here, that's the wrong word here. During times of, I should say, economic conflict, like when the economy goes down the drain, for instance, all of a sudden, groups start fighting with one another. Black people, white people don't get along so well when the economy sucks. Latinos, immigrants, people who are different, people who are minorities get attacked more when times are tough. Crisis is not the right word because the example I was given before has to do with a crisis where let's say someone attacks us, an outsider, and that unites us. This is more of an internal kind of crisis where it's just the economy's bad. So in other words, when things are good, the economy's working well, we can get along better. People can have a job, people can buy a house, right? When things go bad, all of a sudden people start pointing the finger. It's because of them, they suck, or whatever it is. Don't fire me, fire him, right? And what happens during bad economic times is that, white people get to keep their jobs more than Black people. Minorities are the ones that are most likely to be let go. And then they want to pass all these laws to get rid of minorities and get rid of people who are taking up jobs that should just go to others. And that's what happens. The subgroup identity becomes more important when we don't get along, okay? When we don't get along due to something internal, okay? That's what happens. More to this, the Jigsaw Classroom, that's something that could also be used to reduce prejudice, stereotyping, and discrimination. A Jigsaw Classroom is something you could have in a classroom, a situation where you have, it's kind of group work. So you have a mixed race group in the classroom. There's a Black person in there, there's a white person, Latino and Asian. You're a mixed race group, or ethnicity is more accurate to say right nowadays. And each person is given a different but essential task to complete towards the group project. So there's a group project that has to be completed, and each person has a very important role to play. And everyone has to do their job for the whole group to be successful. This uses the 6 principles of effective contact, where the contact is at the individual level, where people are interdependent, working toward a common goal. The authorities are okay with the contact because they're the ones who created these groups to begin with. It uses all the principles of effective contact. And it's also consistent with the mutual differentiation model that we just talked about. So this is a way to improve relations. You know what the problem is, though? That people have already self-segregated themselves. You can go to these schools and stuff like that, and most of them are segregated. Yeah, try to come up with this mixed-sex group in some of these schools. I went to a school that there was nothing but a bunch of Latinos. That's it. There was like 2 black people and like 2 white people. That was about it. How are you going to do this in the classrooms? It's not just one classroom, there's many. You go to the black neighborhoods, nothing but a bunch of black people for the most part. There might be some Latinos too. And then you go to the white neighborhoods, just a bunch of white people. There are some places that are diverse where you can do this, but most of the country is still very segregated. And it's not always possible to do this. Here's the thing, usually the higher up you go, the nicer, the richer, the more expensive the neighborhood, the more white it is. The poorer, more crime-infested neighborhood, more people of color live there. And it doesn't mean that they're bad. They have worse circumstances to live in than the people who are on average white, or who are white on average, I should say, and just people who are just better off, just have better circumstances. So people self-segregate themselves because there are stereotypes, belief that certain people ruin, the neighborhood, they ruin the school, they make things worse, and there's all the stereotypes about black people and Latinos and all that stuff, and they don't want to live with each other. A lot of white people don't want to live with black people or with Latinos. That's the reality. I know a lot of people do nowadays, and we do have a middle class that's more diverse nowadays, but the upper class still very, very segregated. The richer it gets, the more segregated, okay? And then at the lower class, also segregated. The middle class is usually can be a bit more diverse, but people segregate themselves. Why, trust me, okay? Most white people do not want to live with black people. That is the reality. They won't tell you that, but their behavior shows it, right? Just look at neighborhoods. Look at where people live. Look at expensive neighborhoods. Look at white neighborhoods and look at all that stuff. And whenever you see a neighborhood that has a good number of black people in it, that neighborhood is always cheaper to live in. It's less desirable and stuff like that because of the racist policies that exist and all that stuff, but also because a lot of white people do not want to live with black people. They do not want to be there. And they will move and they'll take their money with them and they will then just let that neighborhood go to crap. That's what happens. As minorities, as Latinos and black people move in, the white people move out, and then that neighborhood usually goes to hell. That's what happens. The money disappears, the funding for the school disappears, and everything gets worse. That is what happens. I can show you pictures of the neighborhood that I grew up in, show you pictures from the 1950s. And then when I was growing up there, and even now, it happens, it has happened, and it is still happening. If you truly believe in reducing this kind of stuff, right? Prejudice, stereotyping, discrimination, you have to do more than just talk, okay? You have to behave as if it matters to you. Stop doing things like that, right? Stop segregating yourselves, right? We're better together. And that's the lesson of multiculturalism. Let me talk about multiculturalism. As a country, we are better off because we are diverse, because there are a lot of differences among us. Multiculturalism is an approach that emphasizes understanding of different societal groups, that we have differences. Yes, there's different religions. Yes, there's different ethnicities. There's rich people, there's poor people. There are a lot of different groups. And that's okay, that we are different, right? We understand that. One group isn't better than the other. Even if you're wealthy, that doesn't mean you're better than people who are poor. You might have more money, that doesn't make you better. That's the reality. It doesn't make you better. It doesn't make you any more of a human being, okay? We also basically, celebrate the unique contributions of the different groups to the richness of society, to the contributions for art, music, spiritualism, leadership, food, everything. Think about when you go out to eat, think about all the different types of food that you can eat. The whole world is basically right there because of all the different groups that live here. You can have Chinese, you can have, Mexican food, you can have Italian, you can have everything. If we didn't have that diversity, you wouldn't have those choices. Think about the music, how awesome it is, and how much better it's gotten, by the way, over time when there's more people contributing. Our diversity is a good thing, not a bad thing. When music wasn't diverse, when it was just basically just a bunch of white people singing in this country, it wasn't as good. That's the reality, okay? The more people contribute, the richer it is, the more diverse it is, the more it appeals to the masses, because we don't all like the same kind of music. And if you want to be forced to just listen to one kind of music, right, that's not good. There have been many contributions for people of many different cultures to the music scene, to the art scene. Think about all those things, right? Think about when you watch comedy on Netflix. Think about all the different types of people you see who are so funny. It's not one kind of people. It's a whole bunch of different kinds of people, right? Think about all that. Think about the Olympics, how the US wins the most gold medals. Do you think that's just because of white people? Or just because of black people? No, it's everybody. Everybody's in there, all represented. We get the best of everyone. We're a very rich country and we attract the best talent, so to speak. And that's why we're the best. The military too. It's everyone, right? We are better off because of our diversity, not worse. We don't all have to be the same. There's a lot of variation within the groups. Despite stereotypes and typical characteristics, we're not all the same, even within our own groups. Right? Not all Latinos are the same, not all black people, not all white people. We're different, and that's okay. And we should celebrate our uniqueness, our contributions, right? All those things. Diversity is actually important for our survival. We're better off, we're stronger because of that. Think about nature, right? When you have an environment that's not very diverse, where only certain types of plants grow there, and there's only a certain kind of animal that lives there. If something should change in the environment, that habitat will be wiped out. Those animals will die off very quickly and the plants will die. As opposed to when you have a very rich, diverse environment with different plants, different types of animals, that is an environment that even if the weather changes due to climate change or things change, that environment will still continue to basically to exist. Sure, some species will die off, but some will remain. Some plants will die, others will adapt. It's the same thing with us as a country. As a society, our differences make us stronger. We don't all have to be the same. If we were to all be the same and all think the same way, we wouldn't have all the different things we have. All the music, all the different types of dance, or the cuisine and art, and even technology, all those things, right? They make us stronger. We are the best because of our diversity, okay? Multiculturalism is a good thing, not a bad thing. And I just want to point out, just to be real here, that a lot of people don't believe in this. A lot of people say, you know what, screw your multiculturalism. No, this is America, right? This is a country, it's a white country, you speak English, this is a Christian country. Forget your multiculturalism. It doesn't work. It just creates problems, right? You guys just go live in your own countries and leave us the hell alone. A lot of people believe that. They are opposed to multiculturalism, and that's a very bad thing. I see that as just wrong. We've already tried that, by the way, right? Just believing that we should all be the same, right? And excluding people. We know about that racist history. It is bad. It is awful. It is evil. This is the right thing. This is the way forward. And this is where things are going. And some people are going to be taken there kicking and screaming. They don't accept it. Okay, that is where I'll stop, you guys. That's the end of this chapter.